If there is one thing scholars are yet to agree on, it's which economic model is best suited for Nigeria, considering the multifaceted challenges faced by the country over the years. Nigeria, with over 200 million people and more than half of this population being youth, is considered a huge economic potential for the country if well harnessed. But somehow, the youthful population of the country has not counted as an advantage for the country. What model can be deployed to stimulate growth, reduce poverty, create employment amongst youth, and move the nation towards production? Now, we have in the studio to look at this, Ken Amaeshi, Professor of Business, European Institute, Florence, Italy. Thank you for coming to Newsnight.
Thank you for having me.
When you talk about Nigeria's economy, sometimes you don't even know, because it's like it's a hydra-headed, I don't want to say monster, matter. And then you're thinking of where to start. Is it the economic system? Is it the model? Is it the practice? Is it the result? Is it the application? You know, so speak to us about what is best suited for our context, our multiracial place, situation as Nigeria. Speak to us about the best model that we need to adopt.
Talking about the best, I'll be very careful with that, because it's all about the journey, right? So, and economics, as much as it tries to pretend that is an exact science,
right,
is very much an experiment, a social experiment.
Social science, yeah.
Yes, it's a social science, but it's also a social experiment, because we have human beings, and human beings are not like robots or objects that we can subject to the way physical sciences would deal with them.
Right.
So I think the key point here is to emphasize that economics in itself is a product of social context. It's a product of worldviews. Think about the neoclassical economics, following Adam Smith. You know, it's all about the market and the role the government needs to play. So, and it's born out of an understanding of how society needs to be organized. So my point then would be to say that if we are to think of economics or economy within an African context or Nigerian context, we need to speak to an economy that relates to our worldviews and how we do things.
That's why I said a multiracial, multicultural place like Nigeria, the multi-ethnic place like Nigeria, there should be something that works best for us at this time as an emerging economy. What should we be looking at?
I think one way to look at the point is to think about what does the economy do for us, how the relationship between the economy and society.
Right.
And I would argue that the economy is there to serve society. So if you look at what we have at the moment, we have high level of unemployment, and high level of unemployment means that the economy is working for a few and not for the many. So how do we rethink that to ensure that no one is left behind? And we have more people that are actively involved in the economy, and we think about the inclusive economy. So I think given where we are, we need to look at our institutions, but the institutions we inherited are not necessarily our own institutions. The capitalism we inherited is mainly a colonial form of capitalism. And I want to also argue, I'm not the first person to argue it, that capitalism is not the same across different parts of the world. So the American version of capitalism is different from the European version, as well as the Chinese version of capitalism. So we need to find a way to domesticate our understanding of capitalism. Back in 2015-16, I did a project, or I led a project on Afri-capitalism. I guess probably you would have heard about Afri-capitalism. It's a concept that Tony Elumelu brought into the conversation. But I did more of the theoretical work with some of my colleagues, researchers, and he funded that piece of work. And there is about how capitalism can speak to Africa's reality. And today, coincidentally too, in addition to my role as a professor at the European University Institute, I'm also the Chief Economic Advisor to the Imo State government. And it's giving me a chance to translate that notion of Afri-capitalism to in a way that resonates with our people. So if you think about the African system, or the Igbo system in particular, we have what we call the umunna. That's the kindred system. So the kindred system is there as a social structure. So the question is, how can this kindred system then support economic productivity? So instead of looking at economy from top-down approach, we are looking at it from bottom-up approach. How can we get the kindreds to be involved in economic production? And we call it the One Kindred, One Business initiative, which is led by the government of Imo State under the leadership of Senator Hope Uzodinma.
Okay, the kindred system, if I go to saying, it's likened to the Hebrew way of learning, of apprenticeship. I do it, you watch. I do it, you do it. And then you do it, I watch you do it. That's a mentorship system. How can we then adapt that into a capitalist system such that it becomes institutionalized?
So in our own context, we looked at unemployment as an issue. And you wonder and think of how many companies do we need to address the number of unemployed graduates. In Nigeria, for example, we had the National Bureau of Statistics last week releasing data on unemployment, our employment, and we found out that about 75% of our people are employed in the informal sector. And if you talk about the informal sector, it's about the rural economy. So again, it's about how that rural economy can be organized in a way that creates jobs and support jobs so that no one is left behind. So the kindred system is, or what we call the one business, one kindred, one business initiative, which is OKOBI, means that each kindred can now become an economic productive unit, and in that sense, they're able to empower more people at the kindred level to participate in the economy. So a kindred might decide to go into poultry, and this, just to put things in context, a kindred might be an extended family. It doesn't need to be the entire community or a village, but if you bring it down to that level, it's another form of talking about family businesses. So we set up 4 criteria that will qualify one to be seen as one kindred, one business initiative. So the first thing is it has to be profit-oriented. The second thing, it has to be group-owned. It's not just about individuals, because when you talk to some people who are interested in SMEs, they're thinking about themselves. But here we want to encourage that group work, because through that way, no one will be left behind. The third thing is it has to be registered. And if it's registered, it's formal, it's accessible to policymakers, so that even if you want to help small businesses with palliatives and all sorts, you have a formal channel to read them. The fourth thing is that it has to be employment-oriented, job creation. It's not just about profit-making, but it also has to create jobs. And the fifth thing is that place matters. So it has to be domiciled. So in our own case, it has to be in Imo State, a business in Imo State to qualify. But it doesn't mean that this concept is limited to Imo State. If you look at other states in the southeast, whether it's Abia or Enugu, Ebonyi, or Anambra, they also have the Umunna system, the kindred system. I would also think that maybe in the southwest of Nigeria, I'm not very conversant with the social structures there, or the northern part of Nigeria. So we're looking at a model, a grassroots model that will shape the Nigerian economy, and if not, even beyond Nigeria, to think of how we can rethink African economy using the kindred system.
Nigeria, as an emerging economy, has not been able to maximize the huge potential of comparative advantage. How can we harness this?
So it goes back to the model, isn't it? I mean, and one thing is to say I have a capitalist system or I have a market, but what is driving that market? I'll give you a good example here. So many companies in Nigeria will present themselves as PLCs, public liability companies. But when you look at them carefully, they are usually family businesses, right? And they don't follow strictly the corporate governance code as you want it in terms of independent directors and so on and so forth. You find that the MDs still call the show, the CEOs, they invite the people they know. And there's nothing wrong in being a family business. So we don't necessarily need to delegitimize family businesses, but to celebrate what we have, because the idea of the family is closer to us than an arm's length market, which you find in American style of capitalism. And there also individualism is rife, and you also have strong institutions that are able to create the sort of transparency and accountability you want. But in our context, we are not yet there. So adopting the American model of capitalism or the European model of capitalism is to pretend that we can fly a new aeroplane even if we are not trained as good pilots.
Now, I'm happy you mentioned corporate governance. Speak to us about where we are in Nigeria in corporate governance.
There are different forms of different corporate governance codes. We have the CBN, Central Bank of Nigeria, has a corporate governance code. The PENCOM also has the pension for the pension sector. We also have the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, which has now tried to harmonize and provide an umbrella corporate governance code. But the point I still make is that corporate governance is about the relationship between business and society.
Yeah.
And that relationship between business and society needs to be nuanced based on our worldviews. So I've lived in Europe for a long time, and I also teach in Europe and understand the European business model. But what happens in Europe can't just be transplanted to Nigeria or to another African country. It wouldn't work. And that's what we are struggling with at this point in time. So where we are affords us the opportunity to rethink, and I'm happy the African Union is looking into that. I have a colleague who is helping the African Union think of how to domesticate corporate governance in such a way that it will work for our firms. And also given the fact that Nigerian system or economic system is dominated by small businesses, if not micro businesses, we need corporate governance that will work for the informal sector, and corporate governance system that will work for small companies, and also ones that will work for the big companies.
Thank you very much indeed for coming to this night. Professor Ken Amaeshi, Professor of Business, European Institute, Florence, Italy. Thank you indeed for coming to this night.